here we go then. Nice Hyundai here. I'm going to go with my Slim X for the wet on wet, the Welcome, and I'm just putting some fade out thinners down to start with, and I'm going to use the wet on wet and blend into it, and this just softens the edge of the wet on wet. Because it's a new door, you see I'm just going over here again, but because it's a new door, I want that edge, I want the transition to be as nice as possible. Do I need to do this? Probably not. Can you get away with it? Yeah. Is it worth risking it? No. I've got wet on wet in the gun anyway for the new door, so I'm just going to make use of having that and just try and smooth out the transition a little bit by using the fade out thinner to help smooth out the edge of the wet on wet here. And I wasn't sure about the undercoat, although the system has told me that it is sort of black undercoat. When you've got a grey car, you probably could get away with a grey, but it's one of these, if you're not following what the system says, you can shoot yourself in the foot. I was a bit dubious about it being a black wet and wet, but you know, we went with what the computer said and we got the result we wanted. So it was just one of those things. With it being so dark, I didn't want to not tie it into the doors, if that makes sense. I thought if I can put a bit on the front door and a bit on the quarter panel, they're going to be the same starting colour as the starting colour of this door, you know, before we put any base coat on it. And by using the wet on wet, that will just allow me to have that subtle edge. It kind of fades out the edge as if it was a clear coat, which is nice. So when I apply the base coat, there's no... Sometimes you'd have to pad it down a little bit with like an 800 or 1000 just to take away some of the edge, but the fade out thinner is doing that for me here. And you'll see here, I'm just putting on the wet on wet, nice and even, and you can see it can be quite chunky, looks a little bit orange peely, but don't be put off by that. Don't be trying to chase glass finishes. I've seen some guys put on some really wet wet on wet coats. This is a coat and a half, and that's all it requires, so I just treat it the same way as I treat the base coat. You'll see there's some texture here, but when we come back in a minute, that'll be silky smooth. And I missed a little bit. What a plonker. But same thing, while you've got it in the gun, why not? Just using the aerosol there to help me hide the blend, which is nice and easy. But you'll see here the wet on wet, as it's dried, it's become silky smooth. There's none of that texture. And here I'm using the fast mover. It's a 1.3. It's a very cheap gun. I think these are about 40 quid. I've just got my wet bed in there. So the wet bed is a transparent base coat that you sort of use it to catch any of the overspray from your base coat colour, and it just helps the transition. I think this is quite a heavy pearl for the grey that it is. It doesn't look like it, but it is. It's got quite a lot of pearl in it. So just to stop there being such like a big edge, or not an edge, but sometimes you can get halo from where it's been flicked in. So by having the wet bed on there, it's just going to help the transition. So Welcome 1.3 here, and you'll just see I'm just getting that colour on. I do really enjoy this system for putting paint on. One sort of a medium wet coat followed by another medium wet coat, which is more your second coat. You do have to think about your transition and how your pearl's going to lie down, but it's a really nice way of painting. And because of the style that it is, the sort of one and an effect coat, it's got really good coverage, which you know, going into it, I knew that the black was going to be a dark colour and it was going to cover, but just making sure that you've got the same transition from the door to the wing, and then the new door bolted in between. It's just that peace of mind doing it that way. And you'll notice here as well how silky smooth the wet and wet's gone. It was chunky, it was orange peely, but as it dries out, it just goes super smooth, which is the perfect substrate for the base to go onto. So again, nice big coat on the inside of this door, and we are happy. Again, just making sure you get your edges. I always talk about edges, but it's one of them things when you miss underneath the door or something like that, to have to repaint something, it's just a nightmare. Especially again if somebody builds this door up and then you've missed a little bit on the bottom, and it's like, oh, we have to take the door off, take it apart. I suppose you could try and local it on the car and do some sort of weird local where you got to lie on your back or whatever. It's just not worth it. Make sure you get it all on where it needs to go first try. And you see the coverage of this. It just loves it. It gets it on there with this 1.3 and lays down real smooth. And although I believe there is sort of black stickers that go up and around these frames, it's important for me anyway to paint them the same. It just gives that little bit of extra protection to the car, making sure that the electro coating under there does have some sort of coating over the top of it. You could leave them black, but it's not worth it. The amount of paint that you mix anyway, and what it's going to cost you to put a quick coat around them is no bother. You see here, Qualcomm Geo 1.2 2-bar, full fan, full fluid. I do find this gun, if you wind the fluid tip in any, it can be quite slow. So I like this full fluid. Basically the fluid adjuster pretty much hanging out the back of it, but it does give that lovely finish, so that I'm after. Yeah, the bagging on the door there's a little bit loose for my liking. Sometimes you can get bits of dirt and dust trapped in there, and then if you're blowing sort of 2 bar of air across it, that's usually the time that it's going to pop out, is in your clear coat. But again, just taking my time. I like to work bottom to top as well, so you can kind of see exactly where the clear coat's landing as you're applying it. I was just thinking to myself, because I recorded these videos a long time ago, what way I was going to do this door. The insides of the doors, I usually give 1 good coat of clear coat. Sometimes I'll do 2, so I'm imagining I'm doing 1 across the face here, and then 1 around the back on the next time around. And again, the same up here where the stickers are going to be, although there is black stickers that are going up there. Just make sure that we get the clear coat and we get the coverage and the protection that the clear coat and the base will offer, as well as the sticker. You know, at least for me, that part isn't going to ever fail. If you get like although it'd be an odd place to see stone chips, I have seen rips and stuff in them, and then if for whatever reason it rusts under there, you've got yourself a problem. Or at least the owner of the vehicle with further down the road. And on with the second coat. I like to leave a good 5 minutes in between for a flash off, just to make sure that we're not overdoing it with the clear. You don't want to get any solvent pop or anything like that, or even if it's too wet from the first coat and you've not let it flash off enough, it will start to run and things like that, and you'll get heavy edges. So just show a little bit of restraint. Take that 5 minutes. Maybe because sometimes I used to be really keen to just take your air fed and your belt and that off, put it down, and then that way at least that buys you a couple of minutes putting it on and off, just so you're not tempted to run back in and put the clear on too quickly. Or you could use a timer. I know a couple of guys that use the stopwatch, stopwatch feature on their smartwatch, just to double check that you're not overdoing it. Again, to get to this point and have such a nice job. I mean, look at the reflection in the first coat. It's a nice finish, and then just to be let down by being that little bit too keen to go and get the next coat on, you could cause yourself a run or solvent popping, or like picture framing, where you get heavy edges around the doors and stuff. I found it is one of those things you hear people say to go faster is to slow down. Slow down, get the process right, take your time with it, and it will come out right first try. You see here I'm just using the old back of the hand trick as well, just to check the edges, or the bottom edge of the door at least. You notice as well, I'm although the camera's on the helmet, I'm using like an angle to look down the door to make sure that the coverage is where I want it. In some lights it's hard to see the bottom of the doors and stuff, so any way you can manipulate the way you're looking at it to use the lights on the top of the oven just to get a good view of what you're painting is going to make your life easier. Must not have been happy with the top of that door there. And I am going around the back for a second coat. And I do recall on a few jobs that we used to just put one good coat on the inside of the doors. I suppose that would depend on the job, really. Although I don't know why it would depend on the job. There's doing it properly and there's doing it properly, I suppose. But, you know, in some cases you do... The inside of the door doesn't take much abuse, really. It's not subject to the same sort of stresses as the outside would, road tar and the weather and things like that. Like they don't often get polished, so as long as if you just got one good coat in there and it all looks nice and it is how it is, you just save a little bit of material. So I'm just going to come in with my fade out now and make sure that we tidy up the inside of the doors in this door shut. This fade out fin is really good as well. It doesn't take a lot to polish up. It really does melt the old clear coat into the new, which makes it a pleasure. You can pretty much get in there and do it by hand. Maybe give it a tickle with 3000 Trizac and then polish it up by hand. It doesn't take a lot at all. It's a bit awkward in here with the paper, but I've used the paper to stop the base coat overspray from the transition on the door. And you'll just see here the final job. It's come out really nice. One or two nibs maybe in that quarter panel, but again, seamless blend by using the wet on wet. So give it a try and see what you think. Let me know in the comments if it helps out or not. But it worked for me, so hope this helps.